Adult content photographers. What was the most awkward moment you had? What do you feel when you film? How is your job generally? Story 1. I do Baudouin photography as a side hustle and you'd be amazed at how quickly tasteful it can turn into tacky or downright raunchy. Awkward? There's a ton of that just by virtue of the work. But here are my top 3 examples. A bride decided to do a photo shoot for her groom. She comes in with an assortment of outfits that are progressively provocative, and one of them is the classic white bridal lingerie getup, which we decided to save for last. The shoot is going well. The bride isn't nervous and is actually pretty fun and chill. She poses in some cool, looks like a Central baseball jersey to represent their team in the dorky outfit, a Lord of the Rings. We get to the end of the shoot and it's time for the super seductive wedding night look. The bride touches up her makeup and she's looking hot. I send her off to get changed because the outfit consists of stockings, garters, and a corset, and I want her to have enough time for a good assortment of posing options. As I'm making a few adjustments to the lighting, I hear a scream from the back. I rush to the dressing area and call the bride's name. I find her half-dressed and sobbing, clutching her chest. I look a little closer and there's blood on her hand and her chest. I ask her what happened, but she's too upset to speak. I ask if she can show me, so she moves her hand and then I scream. It turns out she didn't know what the garter clip was for and was sticking for some type of clamp. She ended up needing stitches. A few weeks later we were able to rush an appointment for her to finish the shoot in time for her wedding, but she decided to leave the stockings and their accoutrements behind for the final go. Number 2. Another good one was when a young woman treated herself to a photo shoot for her 21st birthday. She said it was all about giving herself a confidence boost, but it had a hard time believing it because she was definitely the conventionally gorgeous type. I asked her about it and she was very candid. She explained that while she was physically attractive and in great shape, for some reason, whenever a relationship started to get serious, the person would just ghost her. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what that would be, so I told her as much. She got changed and we got started. Things were going smoothly and she was having a good time. She was an absolute knockout and a natural at posing. We really enjoyed ourselves, talking throughout the process and getting to know one another. The time came for some more close-up shots. So I talked through what that could look like and let her decide how she wanted to stage them and whether she wanted to be fully bare or partially bare. She decided on being fully bare and went to the dressing area to get herself situated. She comes back and I start with some full body shots and move a bit closer every few shots. I get to be about a foot away from her and I'm hit with the most intense smell. I know that it can't possibly be coming from anywhere but her body. I get a little closer to confirm my suspicions and yep, it's definitely coming from her lady bits. I figure there has to be something going on with this girl's health or hygiene and decide to bite the bullet and talk to her about it. I don't beat around the bush. I just say, hey lady, I have to be honest with you. There's a bit of a smell down there. She doesn't even look surprised and she looks at me like I have 3 heads and tells me, of course there is. I keep my flower wild. We get to talking about it in depth and I learn that not only does she not groom down there, she also doesn't wash it. Her mother warned her against using feminine cleaning products and she took that to mean all cleaning products. Fam. I gave her a clothed demonstration of how I wash myself, handed her a bar of soap and let her use the shower in my attached apartment to remedy that situation immediately. She came back with a smile on her face and a song in her heart and we finished this shoot without incident. That could have gone a whole different way. To this day, she tells me I changed her life. Number 3. I saved this one for last because it was the most awkward for me. I don't often shoot couples for various reasons. However, a really good friend of mine asked very nicely and I always had a little crush on her, so I said yes. I was confused though because I'd never met her partner and was kind of surprised to hear she was dating someone and it was serious enough for an intimate photo shoot. She admitted it was new but she was just so into him that she had to go for it. We set the date and talked about logistics and all seemed fine. The day of the shoot comes around and I'm nervous. I hate couple shoots, y'all. They arrive and we do introductions. Something about the boyfriend seems familiar but also kind of off. But I just roll with things. They change clothes and we start off with some cheesy look into her eye stuff to ease into the more daring stuff. We get into a rhythm and things are actually not terrible. So we take a break to get ready for the next set of shots. This is where it gets awkward. The boyfriend comes out first and he just kind of stares at me. He starts talking and tries to pull the whole, "you're too pretty to be behind the camera" thing and I'm like, dude, chill. He looks at me with a weirdly intense expression and asks, "Do you remember me?" To which the only answer, dear reader, was no. My friend, his girlfriend, returns and I can't wait to get started so we can be finished. As soon as they remove their robes, it gets really awkward. I notice the boyfriend has a small tattoo on his left hip depicting a sort of hipster aero adventure situation that looked familiar, friends. But then I look over at his right hip and see a tattoo of similar size with my and rather uncommon name. That's when I remember the guy. I went on 3 dates with him over the course of 2 weeks and then broke it off with him because he had some serious red flags. My friend notices my face and is like, "Oh yeah, the tattoo. That's his one that got away from a while back. Weird that you have the same name though." I look at her and I know I can't lie, so I flat out say, "I think that's my name." Her boyfriend then starts crying and coming toward us both, calling out not for his current girlfriend of nearly 6 months, but for me. I get out of there and let them talk. It gets awfully quiet, so I head back in to check on things only to find my friend is nowhere to be found and her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, is quietly sobbing in the middle of the studio floor. I just left him there and sent my guy friend to get him out of there for me while I checked on the girlfriend. She broke up with him on the spot and left because she couldn't face me. She made sure he still paid me though and promised to never ask me to do a couple shoot again. I did eventually do a solo shoot with her, but that's a tale for another thread entirely. Story 2. I used to shoot adult material in college and for a few years after graduated college, 2010 to 16-ish. I have a degree in photography and was a Boy Scout and I'm very good at knots. So a friend got me into it and photographed them for her site. This led to me doing tons more work. The worst is feeder material. These poor women would just eat and eat on camera and then throw up all over themselves. I was pretty rough stuff to photograph and film. Also, it would make me kind of sad because these women would gain large amounts of weight quickly each time you'd work with them and just didn't seem healthy. As has been said already, the worst part is the smell. The smells were enough to make you gag sometimes. Also, if you want to make decent money, you have to do both gay and straight scenes, which as a straight male at first is really odd, but you get used to it shockingly quickly. The worst part is that you become kind of numb to it all when you're behind the camera. You'll meet your model and she will be very attractive, but as soon as you're behind the camera, it becomes very much a job and you become focused on getting a good shot and getting the lighting correct. The awkwardness disappears so quickly. You sort of become numb to it all at the point in your personal life where it doesn't affect you the same. One of the most awkward things was when models would show up with their boyfriends who would just be really weird and awkward in the background. It would almost always be buff military or former military dudes or wannabe MMA fighter types. They'd stand across armed off to the side and be very encouraging to their partners while watching them. I personally just always found that odd. I understand they accompanied them, I guess, to make them feel safe, but some of the weird things they'd say would always make you scratch your head. Never really got involved with the scenes other than those. Honestly, sets were much more professional than I imagined when I was younger. Most of the girls were not like crazy girls who wanted to do it constantly. It was literally them turning it on and off for the camera. I worked with a smaller budget company, so I never saw fluffers and I honestly questioned if they really exist. It would be common to see the guys between shots to keep it up, which is sort of weird. You'd be talking to them about asserting a shot and they'd just be touching it the whole time. It was pretty good. Usually on set days it was about $60 an hour paid out in 4-hour blocks, so even if you worked 6 hours you'd get paid for 8, which was cool. You're an independent contractor even if you tend to just work for one company. And mostly out of that world now. The occasional shooting for some girls who I've stayed in contact with to shoot for their of pages. Story 3. I'm a photographer who has, on a few occasions, taken indecent photos, usually for friends who have of, but my story is from before I did so. A model reached out to me for a shoot, reached out to normally and talked out to minor details. Nothing explicit, just a bit half of bare stuff. Mind you, it didn't know her at all. She was a random person who reached out on Instagram. She texts me and tells me that we're going to FaceTime at 12 a.m. I insist that we can talk tomorrow and that I'm already in bed, and she persists, saying that it's fine. I hate FaceTiming, especially with people I don't know, especially at midnight when I'm already cozy in bed. She calls me and is in the middle of taking a whiz and hammered. I was taken aback and told her we could just talk tomorrow. She gets upset and says that we need to talk now so she can show me her body and her tattoos. She says this as she's wiping up. I was super skeeved out and hung up. Needless to say, I did not feel comfortable doing a photo shoot with her and I ghosted. That is why you don't do FaceTime with absolute strangers you meet online. It might actually be cuckoo in real life. Story 4. When I was 22, I was asked by a friend of mine to record him and his wife. He said it didn't have to be weird because they weren't looking for a tryout or anything like that. I agreed because it sounded interesting, but the things they did were extremely rough and unexpected. At one point, he started crying while she was doing something to his backside and asked if he was alright, which caused him to get angry and yell at me for interrupting them. I stayed quiet after that and kept recording while he was able to get back in the mood. After they were done, he left the room and his wife asked me never to bring up crying to him because he was sensitive about it. I of course agreed and she hugged me, then kissed me on the cheek, which I really didn't like because she was still bare and covered in sweat. Story 5. I'm a makeup artist. I'm there on set all the time so I see it all. Nothing has really been awkward for me. I'm pretty laid back and it all just seems pretty natural for me, just like people doing their jobs. I guess the most awkward moment is if I can tell the two actors don't have chemistry or they're not attracted to each other. I feel like it shows on film. That's the only moment I could describe as being awkward. Oh, actually, it was really awkward for me this one time filming a group. I went into a different room to clean my brushes and one guy took a break to come and talk to me. He was standing there, bare, while asking about my job. I've seen literally everything, but it was pretty awkward for one guy leaving a room after a set to come and talk to me about nothing multiple times. He was twice my age too. I asked him if he was probably needed on the set and he agreed. Some people have mentioned fake stuff and yeah, it is used sometimes. Usually, they'll get the real shot and use the fake one to get a better angle if needed. If he was aiming for the chest and misses, we used the fake one to make it look hotter. I've been a spare set of hands on sets before. The job in general is awesome. I met some really cool people and made some awesome friends. I don't get turned on during filming before you ask, except maybe this one scene where it was one girl and two really attractive guys that were also both bi and all really enjoying themselves. It is pretty hot when I can tell the actors are super into it, enjoying themselves. I've had to put makeup and bums that were covered in bruising from shoots they'd had before. Most things aren't awkward, honestly. They're all just human bodies and things happen. I guess most people who would find bodies awkward wouldn't be working in the industry. This lady's self-control is so impressive. Even temptation throws in the towel. If you're ready to outsmart your cravings and leave them scratching their heads in envy, it's high time you joined a button-pressing party by hitting that like button and subscribing. Trust me, your impulses will be begging for mercy. Story 6. I'm a photographer who shoots a lot of bare art and my models range from first-time models who only shoot fully clothed to people who shoot bare. Before I ever shoot, I give the model a safety talk in which I say that I won't touch them, that I'll show them every shot I take and that if anything is making them uncomfortable, I want them to speak up. I once had a model interrupt that and said, "My job is mainly shooting wild stuff. There's nothing that you're going to say or do that will make me uncomfortable." That felt awkward to me. I thought about it for a second and told her that I did not care what you did at other times. I was going to treat her like I treated every other model. And then I went on with my model's safety talk. I have to admit that I'm always a bit nervous working with a model who's new to me. Her saying that actually made me relax a bit during the shoot. Story 7. Back when I was a broke out-of-work photojournalist, I would take all sorts of photo gigs to make ends meet, including some adult content. After one of the jobs, the client, her makeup girl and I went to a diner to go over the photos and decide which ones I would touch up. She'd been fasting to look skinnier for the shoot so she wasn't too picky about where we stopped. When we got there, she practically ran to the corner booth before ordering a huge burger. There were well over 1,000 shots so going through them took a while. Surprisingly, our reader was incredibly attentive the entire time. Despite us sitting there well after the food had been finished, I don't think our waters or coffees were even less than half full and he kept reassuring us that we could stay as long as we needed. It was almost annoying how he kept checking on us every few minutes. Once we had narrowed it down to a couple dozen photos to be touched up, we paid the tab and got up to leave. That's when I noticed the giant mirror right behind the booth. Every time the waiter came over, he got an explicit eye full of the woman sitting next to me on my laptop screen. Thankfully, the model wasn't exactly bashful about her body and found it hilarious. And that is why you really can't trust people who are overly nice. That server would probably get Best Employee of the Month for his dedicated work that night with a side of feast for his eyes. Story 8. I used to take photos of love dolls. Really expensive ones that cost thousands of dollars. I had my studio in my garage because my house was too small for any other room. It was the middle of summer and it was starting to get hot in the garage. Since I was alone, I undressed completely because I was just sweating profusely. These dolls are not easy to position. Their bones are metal and are very heavy. I think an actual girl would at least help you move correctly. Well, as I was grabbing one and moving it into position, my wife walked into the garage to which I screamed, "This is not what it looks like." She knew I was photographing them without clothes but she just couldn't stop laughing. Story 9. I started shooting for the owner of our local adult store chain, answered an ad on Craigslist. I was shooting a scene with him and his girlfriend when an accident happened. He was 50 or so and we shot with his girlfriend who was 32 years younger than him, who I knew from a different school and had basically run away from home. She lived with him and was kept in a strict servitude relationship, wearing a collar which purposely limited head movement 24/7. She took care of his kids between shooting scenes with me, totally healthy everything. Another time we hired a random guy who showed up to the hotel, couldn't get into it, then drank an entire fifth of rum in 10 minutes, trying to do it soft. He got so sad but couldn't show it so then he drove off, which the producer allowed him to do. This was a truly terrible experience for me. The way intimacy can be so degrading to everyone involved if it's controlled by toxicity and hoard values. So now I make ethical content that shows how intimacy can be lovely and consensual and not incredibly which is truly awesome. Support your local ethical prawn makers, y'all. Story 10. My dad's in the industry as a photographer, sometimes stepping close to the line of straight-up prawn. I help him out sometimes during shoots. They're a lot of fun most of the time and everyone is really chill and cool to talk to. He offers courses for other photographers who are trying to start out in the industry. These often take place over the span of a few days in an exotic setting. For example, on islands like Mallorca or Ibiza, we often had run-ins with the police from different countries because tourists called them. He often gets criticism. People call him out for objectifying women and such. And yeah, the industry is brutal and some photographers are dirtbags. This is why my dad has a moral codex written down on his website and online profiles, which is something that, surprisingly, not many photographers have. Some modeling agencies are straight up awful, going as far as only allowing the models to eat a certain amount of food per day. The only allowed snacks during shoots for a former model he had some shootings with were Tic Tacs. Or to restrict their personal lives, preventing them from having boyfriends, controlling their social media, etc. Which is why my dad nowadays only works with freelancing models, both male and female. You often hear stories about photographers and models getting frisky behind the scenes. This is true to an extent. Some do it and fully embrace it, but not without consent from the models. My dad sees his work more as an art form. Most of his work is pretty artistic or provocative. Imagine severely overweight or underweight models in stereotypically sexy poses. People often ask me if I believe him when he says that he'd never touch a model. And yeah, I do. Story 11. I was a photographer for 17 years. From shooting magazines like Men Only and Club International to A1 titles I can't recall. Then I moved on to internet stuff and was based in Central Europe. Once, we shot a girl-boy set and only when the girl was signing the model release did we see that she was really young. Gulp. My assistant forgot to ask for her official documentation before the shoot. When I was chatting with a model after work, she said that this was the only way she could get money for herself. As her boyfriend is very controlling and jealous, it turns out he's a big mafia guy who just got out of prison and never booked her again. The worst were the girls who were light and personal hygiene. Some of those smells could reach a bison at 20 meters. The model thought it would be a great idea to tell her mom that this was her new work. But it turned out both the mom and dad were in town and both showed up. That was super awkward as they were totally ashamed and gutted by her choices. Models with steel makeup, clothes, and anything that wasn't nailed down. It was just a job. I ran my own website, so it allowed me the freedom to live all over the world and party hard for all those years. The negatives are that I started to despise myself for depicting women in a certain way. Oh, and the work more or less was any intimacy drive. And now we all know why this dude quit the job. I'll give you a hint. Jealous, controlling, mafia boss boyfriend of one of his models. Story 12. I shoot and film everything. For pro and amateur models and for professional websites. I also manage an account for my photography and films. The weirdest thing is how normal it feels during a shoot or filming. During bare photography, there is usually constant banter with a model, even when it's quite an explicit shoot. The excitement is entirely faked, so the conversation is pretty natural. The only time it's generally awkward is when the male model has trouble getting it up. Then there's a bunch of waiting around. Usually while he watches videos, then he's like, "Go now." And we all have to be ready. I hope you enjoyed the video.